3, 2, 1, go. I'm here with Mr. Clive Gosling. Clive, finally, sit down.
Yep, this is a quick sit down. I think we've been talking about doing a podcast for years, and I think we decided that if we're going to do it, we need to do it properly. I need to be in LA. We've got bags.
Yes.
We need to dig through all the dirty past.
Yes.
And all the stories that we can tell. So today, I think, is just like a quick. You're in the UK. Let's have a catch up and a chat.
All right, cool. All right, well, let's start it off. I've known you for literally 40 years, probably.
Yeah.
We kind of started at the same time. We kind of did everything together. You was a couple of years older than me, but same races, same everything, really. Yep. And so a lot of great stories to share. When did you start BMX? How did you find it?
I started BMX in 1980 on July the 21st, which was my 11th birthday, and my family had a bike shop. A lot of people know about Edwards because they had BMX teams for many years. So that was my family's bike shop. That was started by my great-grandfather in 1908. So bikes and bike shops have been in the family for forever. And it was my birthday, and my mum took me to the bike shop, and my mum worked in the business as well. And my BMX had just come out, and they mainly had like Team Murrays in the shop. And my mum said to my granddad, it's Clive's birthday, he wants a bike. And my granddad said, he can have any bike in the shop if it's his birthday. And my mum said, he actually wants one of those new BMXs. And my granddad said, well, if he wants one of those toys, you're going to have to pay for it. So I think that's the perception of BMX in the early days when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it was, maybe something that wasn't going to last. And actually one of my, I think one of my regrets, one of my mum's regrets was that my granddad died before he saw BMX become a proper sport.
Right.
And also, me become all right at doing a proper sport.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's when I got my first bike.
Can you remember finding the track for the first time?
Riding the track, yeah, I can. I mean, like I said, how long have you got? My first bike was a blue and yellow Team Murray. I think it was a 340, the Leicester mags, the pedal back brake, the box bars. My first kit was from Halfords because that's all you could really get.
I think we all had that.
Yeah, when Halfords got a helmet and stuff, and man, I went through 3 or 4 of those frames. They used to split the bottom bracket. The bottom bracket shells had a seam, so they used to split the bottom brackets. Used to break the back ends. I can't remember how many of those. I think I had 3 or 4 of those, because they just used to keep breaking. But we, like a few of my friends had them as well, and we, back then before the internet, magazines or anything, you used to like find out, in the playground, like where you would go.
Yeah.
And there was like, everybody with BMXs goes down
the jumps.
The back of East Croydon train station. There's a derelict car park, and some kids put a plank of wood up against a milk crate.
Right.
So I remember like riding over there in my Parker coat with my mate, and he actually had a Team Murray 310, which was like orange and black.
Mm-hmm.
And every time we used to go to the woods, the wasps wouldn't leave him alone. and we went down there and we saw these kids jumping. But the area that I lived in, so that was near Croydon, where I grew up when I was a kid. And that area actually was a real hot spot for a lot of BMX megastars. So literally where we lived and where we rode, so the areas where we rode, like Fox's Wood, Betts Park, places like that, you had people like Trevor Chapman, you had Chris Young, Andy Young, Gary Llewellyn, Wayne Llewellyn, Warren Godfrey, Stephen Godfrey.
Yeah.
You basically had this real hotbed of like southeast London kind of guys. And also, like, because Chris Young used to live so close and he used to have the ramp in the garden, he used to go around there and just, any time you go around there, and there would be, like, some BMX superstars that were...
They were all factory already, them guys, weren't they?
They were all factory. We were just the little Grom hanger-ons that used to go around and, like, watch them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was it. That was where it all started.
Can you remember your first race?
Yeah, my first race was at Buckmore Park. So... You remember the Wiltshires, like Dean Wiltshire?
Eddie?
Yeah, so basically there's a guy called David Wiltshire. He was like the rep for Amoco.
Right.
So he used to come round the shop selling my uncle, or my granddad at the time, Mongoose BMXs. And he said to my mum, he said, they race BMXs down at Buckmore Park. So my mum took me down there, and I think like my helmet wasn't even like good enough, so they like lent me a helmet to do my first race. And I guess that was probably 1981 at Buckmore.
Yeah. Can you remember who you raced with, or?
Oh no, I remember Colin Sharp from OT Cycles was doing the start gate. I don't think they used to have the little skate park there as well at Buckmore Park. I think they sort of just gone from a literally like a rubber band start gate to
a gate.
One man kind of 12-inch high start gate. But if you see, like I saw a picture this week on, I think Keith Wilson put a picture up from Buckmore, where you sort of came around the first turn, you had that little double and then the drop.
Yeah.
So it was like when it was that original configuration of the Buckmore track.
There's some really early pictures of Ruffle there as well, I think, at Buckmore.
That's the kind of era. In fact, I got a picture.
You got some great pictures here.
Yeah, that's a picture, but that's actually when Buckmore had been revamped a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, but the original Buckmore was super small, super tight.
I went once, I think, the National 83, when it was rainy. I was a novice, That's the only time I ever went. But I'd obviously seen it a lot in the magazines already by then, So
Buckmore was awesome.
Okay, so how did you progress? Obviously you started doing nationals pretty quick, right? By 83, you were doing nationals, right?
So we did what kids did.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I kept breaking the bikes. Mum sort of recognised pretty quick that I needed a better bike. So I got a blue Diamondback. It was a blue Diamondback Senior Pro. I can tell you pretty much every nut and bolt on every bike I ever had.
Right.
It's really like ingrained in my in my memory. I can't remember much else from back then. But I had a blue Diamondback, and it had like blue Diamondback bar stem, seat post crank, had everything on it. But I didn't go to nationals. At that point we were still sort of doing like club races and regionals.
Yeah.
The first time I did a national, I was on a red line, and it was probably like 83, like Muddy Outwell, like those sort of races.
Yes, yeah.
They're the first ones I can actually remember.
Yeah.
I can't tell you my first national because I can't remember.
Right. You're on the same as me, then we're about the same, doing next 83.
Yeah, what was your UKBMX?
3075.
Okay, so there you go. Everybody now, if you want to get Dale's card, you've got his PIN number.
I think it has been something at some point.
Oh, yeah, totally. So yeah, I was 2471, so I was
slightly a little bit
earlier, but we were all kind of the same time.
Yeah.
And I think it was a great era because we as we were talking about earlier, we were, when I say we were, like me, you, and others, we were maybe the sort of like next generation
after the 80s.
Yeah.
Boom
So you
guys,
basically had those early 80s pioneers.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, but in 88, we had that big picture in B-Cross magazine.
Yeah.
And it basically said...
The next era.
It was like me, you...
Darren
O'Neill, Rob Stobart.
Yeah.
And it was...
Keith Bryceland.
And it basically said, this is sort of like the next...
era
or generation.
Yeah. That's a great picture. I just wish my seat post weren't so high.
But I think, if I think about like national rankings, if I think about... Actually, I could probably figure out like nationals. I remember when I got my first ever national points. I remember you used to get points if you made a semi-final, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I thought that was great because if you didn't make a semi at a national, you didn't get a ranking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you really felt like you earned it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember Poole National, probably 84. I made the semi. I think I came last in the semi, or maybe 7th, but I got like 1 or 2 national points.
End up to get a number.
Yeah, so the following year I had like a national ranking, and that was a really big deal for me. And I think my national rankings went like 27, 24, 22, 17, 14, 7, 4, 1, something like that.
Yeah.
So like you just 8, if you stick around something long enough, you'll eventually be good at it.
Yeah, well, I think we were all, like I say, we're all on the same thing. It took a while for us all to work it out. But like I say, when that bubble burst and a few of those early factory guys kind of disappeared, we were all ready to step into that next era. And I'm kind of jumping the gun a bit here, but I think me, you and Tom was probably the first national team outing, right? When we went to
Perpignan.
That was the first time first time I flew to a race, everything was paid.
Yeah.
But we'll go back to that. Let's go back a few more years first. So obviously you're in the age group of doom, as we say, Paul calls it. Darren Wood, Lee Alexander, Stu Diggins. I mean, the list goes on of riders and stuff. So it was probably pretty tough for you for those first few years, right?
Yeah, especially being from sort of London area, because that was also a real hotbed for those riders.
Yeah.
So I think you could go to a regional, and if you made the main at a regional, it it was almost like a national.
Yeah.
I mean, because there literally was so much sort of talent in that age group, and it was a really tough age group.
Yeah.
However, I think it makes you realise why you ride.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really. I'm actually not a very competitive person,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually didn't ride and race BMX because I wanted to win races or make a living out of it, like you and like some other people. I did it because I just really loved doing it.
Yeah.
And it's basically what I did with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
So even late 80s when BMX fell off a cliff and it was absolute, the races were awful, the tracks were awful, everything was awful, we still went racing,
Mm-hmm.
but we were starting to get to the track, race. But really the fun started when the race finished, because we were on the track for a couple of hours jumping, and then we'd go out and we'd go to a nightclub and we'd have fun. So
Yeah.
for me, BMX has always really been about the social element and the friendship element. I'm not a very competitive person, and I never really took it that seriously, and I never really trained, and actually that's why I think I was never actually that good. And the reason I say that is because most of the podcasts that you do and you have done have been with people that have generally been sort of BMX superstars or really successful at BMX. I absolutely don't classify
But I think
myself.
Well, you definitely
I
was,
don't
Clive.
classify
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
Listen, I got number one when everybody else had gone to Superclass.
But you were still progressed as a rider. You was doing stuff that we weren't doing, and even the guys older, the pros, you were picking up for stuff, and you was technically very good.
Oh, I did. Listen, I was good at some stuff. I could speed jump a brick wall.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that because I didn't, especially you and Tom, you guys wanted to be professional BMXers.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to make a living out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I never had that. So therefore, I never trained that hard. I remember when, late 80s. Well, actually, probably the sort of golden time for me was, I started hanging out with Will Smyth and the Jive guys.
Yeah.
And in 88 we went to California for about a month.
Yeah, one of the first guys.
We stayed
in our era at least.
We actually stayed with Gork and the guys at Wizard Publications, so BMX Action magazine. We stayed in their house. We would go and do photo shoots with Mad Dog and Spike Jones, and honestly, it was.
You got some good coverage as well, didn't you?
I think I got a picture in the background of a bike test.
I've seen you in quite a few BMX actions, though. Yeah.
Yeah, but that time, it was just incredible. It was awesome, and it made me want to go back. And literally, when I came back to the UK, I was like, "Wow, BMX in America is where it's at. I'm not staying here." And late 88, I literally just jumped on a plane and went over to NorCal and bummed around on a few sofas and then ended up in Texas with the guys at S&S Racing for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So I was out there. So I was probably one of the earlier riders to go out there and kind of live out there. But again, I didn't go out there like you guys went out there to make a living and progress your careers. Mm-hmm. I went out there for the fun and the adventure of riding and meeting people.
Yeah. No, and I remember when you came back, you definitely progressed as well. So I think that's when you kind of went into your own then, really.
Oh, I had to.
Yeah.
Went out to NorCal and was riding with Cecil Johns. You ever try keeping up with Cecil Johns? Riding up a mountain?
All them guys, all the boss guys and stuff.
They were, that's a whole different podcast story. That was some nuts times. But we were, I'm very thankful to be really lucky to be in the right place at the right time, to have experienced loads of really cool stuff. So, on those, when I was staying in Texas with Michelle and Ryan, the S&S crew, they would have people come out and stay with them. When the Texas National was on, Charles Townsend and Todd Corbett would come out 2 weeks before, and we would all be hanging out and training together and everything else. So I was just really lucky to be able to meet lots of really cool people under the right environment and circumstances to, have lifelong memories and to be able to tell cool stories. So,
Clive, you've always been factory, currently still are. Tell us about some of those earlier teams then, say the first 10 years of racing. Obviously Edwards was your probably first sponsor. Yeah,
I think again lucky to be lucky for the family to have a bike shop.
Mm-hmm.
I really took it for granted back then. We all owe such a big debt to our parents for supporting us and taking us to the races and buying us all those cool bikes. Obviously, from which my mum did, luckily, we had a bike shop, so it was a little bit easier for us because we, got everything, cheap and everything else. But we wouldn't have been able to do it. But I think my blue Diamondback, looking back at it, it was like it was just like blue. Everything was blue. And I remember I completely ruined it at Buckmore when I was absolutely desperate for a pair of Amy Finney grips when they came out.
Right.
It was like about 20 pieces.
Yeah.
And I went over to Jane Windle, a hot shot, and she had one pair left and they were red and yellow. And I was like, I don't care, I'll take them.
Right.
And I had this all blue bike and I put these red and yellow grips on. I stood back and looked at the bike and I was like, oh, well, that's ruined that bike. So then I put some like yellow tyres or something on it. But I think my first really nice bike. So after that, I had a Redline MX2 with like graphite Z rims, and that was a really cool bike. But I think my first really factory bike, the one that I really loved, I had a red GHP in '84.
That was it. Yes.
Man, that bike, I found a
Horror
picture.
pants. Do you have horror pants?
I had horror pants.
Yeah,
But that bike, I found a picture of it the other day.
Yeah.
That bike had star bars, ESP stems, sunlight halves.
Full face helmet, right?
Yeah, full face bell helmet,
yeah.
BMX3. But the bike had like hutch pedals, 401 flight cranks, chrome 7L rims. It had everything on it. If that bike was around today, it would be a collector's wet dream and worth about 5,000, about $5,000. So I think again, lucky to have the bike shop, but also I think I just had quite a good eye at putting together quite a nice bike, and then just used to have some other dads kind of come and ask my advice, what should I put on, and then a few more dads coming over saying, hey, if I pay you, can you put my kid's bike together? So I just liked tinkering with bikes. In fact, there's a cool story there because on the red GHP, I had to learn how to fix stuff because my mum put the bottom bracket in on that bike and ended up putting a hole in the frame. So I was like, I tell you what, Mum, you're really good on the tools, but you step back, I'm going to take it from here. And since then, I've been sort of really focused on making my bikes mint. So after the GHP, you're into 80, what's that? 80, that was 85. So then you're in 86 with the 09. I think one of the best brands.
Still.
The look and the feel.
Yeah, still looks great.
Yeah.
The early pictures.
Yeah. So I went to the bike show, probably Earls Court or Olympia, 85, and Hot Wheels just brought the first 09 frame in.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Graham Merry was there, and I was like, oh, Graham, I love it. And he's like, well, look, I've got one jersey, one bag, one pair of pants, one frame. It's all your size. It'll all fit you. So I was like, yeah, I'll have it. So back then, sponsorship, if you were lucky, was like a bit of a deal on a, you got a deal on a bike or whatever. So, in fact, but because of the Edwards team, I took it for granted, like I said earlier, that that I used to get a lot of stuff that I probably didn't appreciate.
Yeah.
And everybody in the Edwards team, like, initially we just had like red T-shirts with Team Edwards. And I had a Robinson. What am I talking about? 83. I had a really sweet Robinson. So I used to I had the Robinson with all the Robinson kit, and then I had to wear the red Edwards T-shirt over the top of the really factory Robinson kit.
Right.
But yeah, the Edwards team was amazing because it apart from me, who was spoilt rotten back then, it was a lot of really underprivileged kids from Southeast London that probably couldn't afford to get
amazing
to
riders at the Road for Edwards.
Oh, my uncle had this big old red van, and he used to pull up outside Edwards on a Sunday morning, open the back doors, and whoever was there got in the van, and we went racing to Milton Keynes, Hounslow, Hillingdon, wherever.
Yeah.
So yeah, the shop gave a lot of people a good opportunity to ride. People like Gary Llewellyn, Charlie Reynolds, early Edwards riders, Karen Murphy, Dean Idios, some real sort of superstar riders started out on Edwards.
All went on to great things, even during Edwards.
Yeah.
So after 09 Robinson, right? Or was there anything between that?
No, I rode for I say rode for. So in 86 at the Worlds,
talk a little bit about 86. You just did really good at the Euros, right? You got 4th.
Yeah, I think 86 was a bit of a turning point.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, because I think I was sort of like, in 86, I was probably like, able to make most national finals, and that was a pretty stacked age category. and then something just clicked at the Euros in Germany, and I was just riding really good, and I ended up fourth, but because there was kind of like a big kind of snag up down the first straight with bikes and helmets going everywhere. But I actually felt like I could have podiumed or weirdly even
you was watching the video. You was right.
Yeah,
like I say, technically good. Yeah, you was.
It just clicked. Maybe it was the track, it was the bike, whatever it was. But that's kind of when I first maybe realised that actually I can win some shit, and then came back straight into the Worlds.
And running good there again. Yeah, just bad luck.
Yeah, I think I had like Charles Townsend in my quarter and slid out in the last main, but I was in fourth when I slid out.
And along with, like I mentioned when I talked to Tom, and I think Woody as well, one of the few guys to pick up for that second jump down the second straight. A lot of the pros weren't even doing that.
No, like I said earlier, if I could probably do one thing better than most people, it would just be I could speed jump the shit out of
and
everything.
pedal down the downside. He was good at that as well. Yeah. So riding good at Slough Worlds, crashed in the quarters, but like I said, it would have been interesting to see how far you'd have gone if you hadn't crashed.
Yeah, and then after that, the rest of '86, I was not only making most finals, but I remember I think Bretton's was the last one, and I think I got third behind Woody and Alex.
Yeah.
And in that age group, you still had people like Tim Print and a whole bunch of really fast guys. So I think the end of '86, I sort of I think I finished that year like national number 7, which in that age group was pretty good. And then the following year, 87, that was like Orlando Worlds and all kinds of stuff going on. So that was a pretty big year as well. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I didn't felt, even though I got better, I've never considered myself like a superstar BMX racer in the same way.
Well, I spoke about it numerous times, and I think that's when the magazines kind of disappeared, and that's when we all kind of came into our the next era, the new generation. Is we came through when there wasn't much media, so it wasn't really documented that much. So maybe we were just doing our own little thing, but at the same time we we're kind of pushing through. Those next couple of years, obviously Tom. Neil Wood, could list so many different people, so it just really wasn't seen, I think,
some of the riders were amazing, Geff, like you said, Neil, but also and Dylan, but also the riding was changing because as like street riding was coming along, so we at a race we'd like disappear, and I remember I think maybe like the Worlds in Marseille, like me, Geff and Dylan found a little like banked a chain link fence, and we probably spent 2 hours just like riding the fence.
There's a picture of Dylan doing that.
So I think because BMX was expanding outside of just like your racers, your freestylers, all of a sudden street kind of blended the two. And like I said, because I was kind of hanging out with Will Smyth and those guys, they'd come over to the UK and we would go and hit up freestyle contests and street contests. So like Hoffman's like first backflip in public at Bercy, his first flare in the UK up at Mansfield, street comps. We were kind of doing all that as well. Yeah. So I think that kept it interesting. It kept me involved, but also it pushed the riding on because the tracks were shit. So we were riding more skate parks, we were riding more ditches, we were riding more bank to walls, we were riding South Bank. We were riding with freestylers. I used to hang out with people like Simon Tabron when I used to live in London. Love that guy. And it didn't matter if you were on a race bike or a freestyle bike, or if you had a race background or freestyle background, you were all just on BMXs having fun. And
like you contributed a lot with the magazine stuff as well. Like you say, there was not much going on, but what was seen in the magazines, like you and obviously Paul, obviously Will.
Yeah.
Still. Yeah. But was kind of helping keep it alive that way as well, So you literally ride your bike, go home and write about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Zines, you used to do the zines a lot for the Federation, UKBMX.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, you wrote all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so I worked at UKBMX with Val Hyde and Bridget Hayes. So I guess that was one of my first actual jobs,
right.
First kind of paid jobs. So I used to travel all the way across the other side of London to the office in Sheen where Bridget used to live. So we I used to do the trackside zine and back then it was before like desktop publishing.
Right.
So I used to like type it out on a typewriter, cut it out, and stick it onto a piece.
Yeah, but I've been reading some of your stuff, like funny stuff as well. Stuff that he's probably going to even print now. It's just like
Bicycles
funny.
and dirt.
Yeah, bicycles and dirt.
Yeah,
I mean,
bicycles
like I
and
say,
dirt.
that we do have to have a proper sit down. So just kind of breezing through a lot of this stuff. And talk a little bit about your mum, because obviously in the background, in the thick of it as well, on the UKBMX and still.
Yeah, like I said, where would we be without our mums? And well, our parents. But for me, it was all about my mum. My dad was a big road rider, and when BMX came along, I used to have a drop bar race bike and used to skid the crap out of it and try and jump stuff on it and smash it to pieces. So my dad was a road guy, and when BMX came out, my dad would say stuff like, when are you going to get a real bike like your dad, that kind of stuff. And then we had a pretty traditional family. My dad would go out for a road ride on Sunday morning, and he'd get back at lunchtime, and my mum would have a roast lunch, and he would eat it and then fall asleep on the TV watching, a professional road race or something on TV. And then when we started racing, like I said, Buckmore was that first race, and me and my mum immediately were like, wow, this is great. I've actually got a really early picture of my mum being like a finish line lady at Buckmore.
Yeah.
Big like donkey jacket and frizzy hair,
Right.
probably about like 83. So I think we started going to BMX races, and my dad would, not really be interested in coming. He came to a few, but he wasn't really interested. So he would go out for his Sunday morning road ride with his friends, come back at lunchtime, and there was no roast lunch because me and my mum were
Right, the track.
Shoreham or Herne Bay or Folkestone or wherever. So my mum drove us not all over the country but all over the world, and not just me. We for years we used to go and pick up Winnie and take him to all the races. Mum used to take Darren O'Neill to all the international races. So mum took everybody everywhere.
Yeah.
And like I said, we would go to Wigan, for example, and mum would be on the finish line all day. I'd be racing, and then we'd finish the race, throw everything in the car. I'd get in the passenger seat and just fall asleep.
Right.
Mum would drive 4 or 5 hours home, but she'd probably had just as much of a hard day as me.
Yeah.
But we just were kind of oblivious to it.
Yeah.
And I think our parents aren't like us today. We're like, hey, I've been doing this all day.
Yeah.
They just
got on
did
with
it.
it.
They just did it. Yeah. So mum started off early, working on finish line, then getting involved with UKBMX, and then like Slough Worlds, heavily involved with that. Even like London Olympics, she was the like main sort of commissaire at London Olympics.
Yeah.
And even she took a little bit of a break for a few years when my nan wasn't well, and she sort of had to look after my nan who passed away a few years ago. But even now, like this year, I went up to the the Supercross in Glasgow. Mum's doing this, the start hill.
Right. Yeah. Definitely longevity.
So the fact she's, and I think also things have changed, because back in the 80s, Carole would have been introduced as, oh, this is Clive's mum.
Right.
Today I go to a
the way
race, it's
round.
like, oh, this is Carole's son.
Yeah.
Because nobody's heard of me anymore. But
Right.
They know who Carole is.
Yeah. No.
So can't begin to express how much gratitude I've got for what my mum has done for me in life and BMX, but also what she's just given the sport of BMX, because she's given a lot of years and a lot of time.
Absolutely, and she's always helped us. Like say when we first started going internationally, like say the first, I think that at least again for us was the first paid. Everything's paid for. You're going to France for a race, and it was me because I was number 1 in 16s. You because you was 17 plus number 1 or 2, and Tom was Superclass number 1. So we all got to go to a big invitational. It was all covered. We flew there. We had a great time. We still talk and laugh and joke about it now. But it was like you say, your mum took care of us, and we had no idea what to do without her.
Yeah, what was that? 86?
88.
88.
Yeah.
I remember it being it was 88. You're
Yeah.
right. And that was down in Perpignan.
Perpignan,
right? Down in Perpignan, and we flew to Paris.
And then took the sleeper train.
We got the sleeper train down there, and actually, having said earlier on how mediocre I think my BMX career has been, that's probably...
You did good there. Yeah, you got third.
I got third
I got
behind Phil and Baz.
Yeah, and I got fourth, yeah.
I got third, you got fourth.
Tom didn't make it.
Tom didn't make the final.
Yeah.
Probably the only time Tom Lynch didn't make an international final.
Right.
But yeah, that was it was indoor on carpet, right?
It was the Bonanza track, the carpet track, which I think still look kind of It was good, you know.
It was really good fun. I
Yeah.
remember that trip. I got great.
Well, that's where we
pictures.
got to hang out with Bass and Phil and be friends with them.
Yeah.
Really, that's where it started for us.
Xavier as well.
Yeah, Claude.
Yeah. Actually, I think as well, you know, the ability for us to sort of travel internationally. You know, I remember. I mean, we're looking at pictures here of Bercy. The first Bercy I went to was '84, which I think was the first one.
Yeah.
I actually broke my thumb in practice and couldn't race, but you know, I remember back then in '84, I would have been like, you know, 14, 15. In fact, I was 14. And, you know, you go to school on Monday morning and the kids would be like, you know, or a teacher would be like, what'd you do at the weekend? Oh, I played football, miss. Oh, yeah, I did this. What'd you do? Oh, I went to Paris for an international BMX race.
Right.
In front of 13,000 spectators.
Yeah.
And it was crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was really, really good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess talk about maybe the first year you got number one then. Talk a little about that, the guys you battled with, kind of.
Yeah, I can do. I mean, like I said, you know, you guys had all gone up to Superclass.
You waited one more year.
Well, it wasn't because I wanted to get a number one plate, although I think subconsciously I probably did, and everybody else had gone up, so I thought my chances would be pretty good. But also, like I said, I just wasn't motivated to
Right. Yeah.
to like move. You know, I never thought that I would ever make a living riding a bike, so it was always about just the fun. But in that year, that number one year, so that would have been '88. I was on Revcore. Who was in that age group that year?
Bobby Hyde. Paul Roberts, obviously.
Paul Roberts. Still.
Robin Mason.
Who
Who got number one in '87, I think, right? He got number one,
Rob
17
Mason.
plus Jonathan Hearn.
He did, and
Yeah,
I could
yeah,
tell.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
right, listen. You know, I'm not taking anything away from him,
Mm-hmm.
but that '87, I think I was in contention for number one.
At Hounslow.
No, I think the last race was Newcastle.
Okay.
And it was one where it pissed with rain. It
Right.
was fucking...
And you didn't want to race because you
I
want to get
didn't
your bike
wanna-
dirty.
and I
I
didn't
remember.
wanna race.
I don't know how I remember that. I just remember it.
I didn't want
Yeah,
to...
I remember.
And my mum was like...
You had new bullseye hubs or something.
Yeah, my mum was like, you could get number one if you race. I'm like, I don't want to race, it's muddy.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get covered in shit. And the track's shit. And she said, but you could get number one.
Right.
And I said, yeah, I'm just not bothered about getting
I
number one.
remember that, yeah.
Yeah, so actually, I think I probably could have got number one in 87.
87.
Yeah, but then... see, that just gets back to what I was saying about me. I think some people might think I'm competitive, but I'm not. And I think we've got other stories about people that are competitive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think she didn't tell me at the time, but my mum did say that sometimes Grot Bags used to ring my mum on a Saturday night, telling my mum that he was going to beat me the following day, but she never told me.
Right.
I think he was trying to psych me out.
Right,
via
yeah.
My mum, but
Playing head games.
Yeah. So who else was in that age bracket?
So yeah, Jonathan.
Some heavy
Yeah,
guys in
it
there,
was still
right?
good. Yeah, there was a Superclass, but 17 plus was still good as well. You know. So
Yeah.
I don't think. And then you did finally go Superclass, so you got number one. Then you bumped up in '89 or the end of '89.
Yeah.
Robinson, right?
Yeah. Do you know what? No. After that, I went to America, and I was out there for nearly 2 years. So I think I sort of came back in '90.
Okay.
And then in '90, yeah, when I came back, I was on Robinson. That's an interesting story. So I was riding for Revcore.
Yeah.
Living in the US, staying with the S&S guys, having a bunch of fun. Went to a national in Lemoore, California, and had Steve Veltman in my moto. And first moto, he hit the gate and I won the moto.
Right.
And do you remember Root Girl that used to run?
It was no. I remember reading about it, but I never
Okay,
never
so
met
there
her.
was
Yeah.
the lady that used to run like the GT and Robinson teams. She didn't see the gate, but she saw me beat Veltman.
Right.
And she came over, and I knew her because Fuzzy was on Robinson, and I knew Fuzzy from years before King of Dirt and stuff like that. And she came over and she's like, yeah, you need to get on Robinson. And because I had a really good relationship with Hot Wheels, and I had a good, like in '87, Graham Merry took me to California when we were at the Orlando Worlds, and we went and stayed with Roger Walsham at CW, went to all the factories. So I kind of felt like I had a real good sort of connection with Hot Wheels and CW and stuff like that. So when she said, "Do you want to ride for Robinson?" I immediately was like, "Oh no, I've got a great relationship with like Revcore and the distributor in the UK, blah blah blah." And then weirdly, I went back to Texas, and I ordered a new frame. Like Revcore, I had some really nice pictures that I gave them, and they used one of the pictures in a Revcore ad in the ABA newspaper.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, you feel like you're something special. And I called them up and I needed a new frame. So I ordered the frame. And the frame was delivered to S&S, but it had like a cash on delivery tag on it for like, $150 or something. So I called them up and I was like, oh, hi, it's Clive. And I just got the frame, but I think there might be some sort of paperwork misunderstanding because there's like a COD thing on there. And they're like, yeah, no, you got to pay for it. And I was like, oh, okay. Okay, bye. And I put the phone down and I was like, fuck, I'm not having that.
No.
So literally, I mean, it was back then, it was picking up the phone because it was pre-internet and stuff. So I picked up the phone to Robinson and I was like, hey, a couple of weekends ago you said if I want to ride with Robinson,
I'm ready.
Yeah, let's do it. And when that happened, all my stuff arrived when the Austin National was just about to happen. So that was my kind of home track, and that would have been my first race. And like Todd Corbett came out a couple of weeks before, and he was hanging out and we were training. So he was there when all my stuff turned up. And I should have bought it today, but I didn't have time to root through my shoe boxes. But I've still got like the packing slip. I mean, what was that like?
30 years ago.
30 years, right?
Yeah.
I've still got a piece of paper that was attached to a box that says, GT paperwork, Clive Gosling, Factory Robinson, and it has all the stuff.
Right.
And Todd Corbett was with me, and he's like, we're going through these boxes, and there's like 6 jerseys, 6 pants, 3 helmets, 4 shoes, jackets, 1,000 decals, 10 pad sets, and Todd Corbett was like, shit, I don't even get this much stuff, and that weekend, like Dino had just like changed the style of the race pants.
That was it, Dino. Yeah, you guys ran that.
And TC was like, no way, they're the new Dino pants. They've only just come out. We're getting them at the weekend, but obviously they must have arrived in the warehouse because you've got them first. So I remember like at the National the following weekend, I turn up on the Robinson with all the gear, and I'm so like proud.
Yes.
And I'm walking, and it's my home track, and I'm walking through the pits, and Greg Hill was on Robinson, right? And bearing in mind, Greg Hill was my hero, right? GHP, Bercy 84, he gave me some GHP stickers, and I nearly wet my pants.
Right.
And Greg Hill was on Robinson. He's like got the old pants, and he like comes over to me, like super aggressive, like, where the fuck did you get those pants? Bear in mind, I never even spoken to Greg Hill, right?
Right.
And I'm like, I just got on Robinson, and they just sent them this week. He's like, well, why don't I have those new pants? I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
So you know what they say about never meeting your heroes. That was a bit awkward. But yeah, that weekend was the first time that I sort of rode for Robinson. It was local tracks, super gnarly age group back then. Didn't make the main, but I had like a picture in BMX Plus. But also, that it rained. So in Texas, if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes. That was a really wet national.
Mm-hmm.
And in the ABA paper, Gork wrote the whole kind of story of the national around me bringing the English weather and how the rain and everything else. So like super cool to even, what it was like to even get a mention in the ABA paper back then was a privilege to actually have, a bit of a story written about it all was pretty cool. And then came back to the UK on Robinson, and then like Dylan's dad and Andy Please's dad, they all kind of got together.
It was a good team, yeah.
And we made a team, right? And that team was like me, Dylan, Andy Please, Jamie Staff, Matt Boyle,
Joe Eastwood.
I mean, that was a team, right?
Yeah. I don't know if Jamie was on it. Jamie was on SC, I think.
Jamie
Staff.
Did I say Jamie Staff?
Yeah, Joe Eastwood. Yeah. Yeah, it was a good team.
Yeah, so that was a super cool team. So did that, but I didn't really get on with the bike. That Robinson had a really short back end, and I found it really like twangy. I couldn't ride too much. So I was on like a S&M dirt bike with Robinson stickers on it, which I never really liked.
I didn't even know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So after Robinson,
must have been GT.
so obviously when I went to America. It was GT. No, it wasn't GT. It was Mongoose, wasn't it?
Elf. Yeah, that was it.
Elf.
Okay. Yeah.
You guys did Invert December 1990.
Good spot.
You two
Yeah,
guys
I forgot
did
about that.
combined bike tests. So you were on the Elf double cross. You were on the Webco.
Webco. I just left Elf.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what it was. So came back to the UK. We did the Robinson thing for about a year, and then because I'd always ridden for Hot Wheels, I always felt sort of loyal to them, and they sort of said, do you want to come back and ride for one of the teams, and that was when Vince Stobart was doing a big push with Elf.
Yeah.
So I rode on the Elf team for a year, which was pretty cool, and then that kind of wound up, maybe because Elf went out of business, I don't know, and then it was on to Mongoose.
Oh, Mongoose.
So me and Keith Dooley on Mongoose.
And that was kind of the first backyard kind of time, wasn't it?
Or was it GT first?
No, I think it was Mongoose because you, Keith, Mike Baggs, Ben Beasley.
Yeah, it was. It was Mongoose. Yeah, Mongoose for that sort of early...
We kind of got GT at the same time, about 93, 94.
Do you know what? GT was mid-90s because...
Worlds in Holland were GT. So that was
in Holland was GT.
93.
Well, weird, because look, that picture there is from 94, and I'm on Mongoose. So GT,
I think
GT must have been before Mongoose.
And then you must have gone back to GT after then, obviously. Yeah.
Okay, so the GT thing was interesting because GT had like a bunch of different distributors at the time, right? Like Hot Shot, Hot Wheels, all that kind of stuff. And then it ended up being like the GT distributor for mountain bike was Karate Sport, right? And I remember there was a show and Bill Deering was over, and he was working for GT at the time, and he like I said to the guys at Karate, you should guys bring the BMX stuff in. And they were like, oh, BMX, waste of time. And Bill Deering was like, are you kidding? BMX is huge. My kids race BMX, blah, blah, blah. So basically, Karate then said to me, look, we don't know anything about BMX. Could you help us like get BMX in? So I helped them do the first order, tell them what was hot, what was not. They had Matt Eo that worked at Karate, and I took Matt out to California to meet everybody at GT and, sort of like, get ingrained with the brand. And then, I did a lot of stuff with them. So the GT Air shows, going around the country doing shows with like Zach Shaw, Simon Tabron, all that kind of stuff. And then sponsoring the team, which back then was, I guess that was like the first proper team that I was involved with in terms of like, everything was free, everybody got expenses.
Yeah.
If I think back sponsorship wise, in 86 when I rode for 09, I got a free jersey. I was really appreciative of getting a free jersey, but that's how sponsorship was back then.
Yeah.
The only time I kind of got any real kind of sponsorship was when I was on RevCore. So basically on Hot Wheels, it was always like, there's a bike and the gear, at a cheap price or on loan. So like 85, I bought the 09. 86, I got a free jersey. 87, we got loaned frames and kit, but at the end of the year, they took it back and gave us new stuff. But the following year was RevCore, and I think that was a pretty big deal. I think they thought it was going to do really well. So actually, that was the first year that, like, Graham and Pam actually invited me and my mum out for dinner to talk about, like, sponsorship for the following year. My mum was like, oh, we've never done this before.
Right.
And Graham was like, yeah, we're going really heavy with RevCore. We really want you to push it, and we're actually going to, like, give you whatever you need. And they actually gave me some budget. They actually gave me like £1,000 like credit for the year, so I could like go over to Hot Wheels and get anything I wanted, or I could like get some stuff and or whatever. So that was the first year where it felt like I was sort of getting something. But because of the bike shop, it always felt like I'd got everything anyway.
Yes.
So I was super lucky. But come that GT era with Karate, it was like literally everything was paid for. Everybody had expenses, and nobody was really on a salary, but it actually felt like it was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
But that was late 80s, early 90s. There was, wasn't a lot of money kicking around.
No. I think that's when the GT thing happened. I think that's when it was starting to be on the climb again, or the next wave was coming then by mid-90s.
And a lot of that, I think, was also fueled by mountain bike because, late 80s, early 90s, mountain bike came out, and that put more money back in the bike industry, and a lot of people like me and you were crossing over into mountain bike, and that was a much bigger, richer market with. Well,
you were getting a good profile then because you were getting a lot of coverage. You're getting covers of the magazines, MB UK, and you was kind of making your name for yourself in that world as well, weren't you?
Yeah, and doing it just because it was something fresh.
Fun, yeah.
If you've been racing BMX for 15 years, you and BMX was not great. Mid 90s, the tracks were, crap again. So mountain biking was just something new and different.
Yeah.
But again, it was about the fun of getting in the car and driving to a race and doing something different that you haven't done before.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it was perfect timing. Yeah, for me as well. It was like already done a good 10 years of BMX, and was like say was at that point then when we were chasing women and beer, and the mountain biking was a bit more of an older demographic, so it was kind of fun for the social thing. It wasn't. That's when we got to meet, obviously Steve Pete and all those guys, and it was just a good scene. The UK, just in the UK alone.
Yeah, you were chasing women. The women were chasing me.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, you was always number one. Yes, you and Carl.
Yeah. Well, actually, Tom was.
Oh, it was smooth. Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
tell you what, Tom Lynch, he's the lady killer.
Yes,
he's the sleeper. Not many people understand that.
Yes.
That guy had some women.
That long black hair.
Oh, yeah. And then when the mountain bike thing came along, kind of, late 90s, I think that was Michigan, right? 94.
Michigan was 94, yeah.
I think that's probably, when was the Dutch Worlds? Was that 93?
93, yeah.
So 94 was my last Worlds.
Yeah.
And then we're into that backyard jam era.
Yeah.
So then it was more like, jump in and messing around and still riding and thrashing. But really then it was more like mountain bike was more interesting and more fun.
Yeah.
And actually had more opportunities. So a lot of us just kind of switched across to mountain bike.
Yeah.
So, I've always had a bike, and it's always had 20-inch wheels. So I've always sort of owned a bike or had a bike, and it's always been a BMX.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've had three BMX number plates. I've never had an MTB number plate. So if you ask me where my heart is at,
still a BMX.
It's always BMX.
Mm-hmm.
If I look at my social feed, it's 90% BMX.
Right.
Last weekend I was down at Battle of Hastings. The riding is just next level. It's great to see a good few old faces and stuff down there. So BMX will always be my first true love.
Yeah.
But also you can't just have one love when there's so many different.
Yeah, and you've always, again, we're speeding up a little bit, but I mean, industry, you've always been in the industry. I mean, I'm one of the, when I've always had questions over the years, a prime example, I've said it before on a podcast before, when I was doing stuff for Free Agent, my boss would always say, what gear, was always just talking about bikes, development, product and stuff, and I never really knew that stuff. It was never my thing. And I remember one year at the bike show in Vegas, you were out, and my boss was bombarding me with all these technical questions and stuff. I says, hang on a minute, let me just go get my friend Clive. And I remember, can you remember you came over and talked to Wen, and I introduced you, like, this is my friend Clive, he's really good at all that stuff. And I think within 10, 15 minutes when you left, he says, your friend, he needs a job, So you had been always that good and influential and just on the ball, and that, brings us to what you're doing now, again, with GT. So maybe talk a little bit about what you're up to now and your role at GT.
Yeah, I can. A couple of weeks ago, we had the Malverns Mountain Bike Festival, and Bob Haro came over, and I had to interview Bob on stage, and I'd only ever met Bob twice before. Earls Court 82, where I queued up for his autograph.
Right, yeah.
And then Tom Lynch spoke to him at the London Olympics, and I was kind of in the background.
Right.
So I never really met him, and Si from Malverns did a little intro on email. But when I sat down with Bob at the Malverns on stage, was the first time I'd ever had a sort of meaningful conversation with him. And I wanted to sort of pretend I didn't know anything about BMX.
Right.
We were talking about 40 years of ET, and I was going to say something like, "So Bob, have you seen the movie ET?"
Right. Yeah.
But Si already did the email intro, sort of saying that I was, a BMX guy. But, after the interview on stage, we finished, and Bob said to me, "Shit, man, you know a lot about BMX." And I said, "Bob, you don't know half the story."
Right.
I think it's just because I can't remember school or friends at school, but I remember, like I said, every nut and bolt on every bike. Every race we went to.
Well, you knew the business and the bikes, and say you was very just you knew all the stuff that I probably didn't know. I was just so focused on racing and training, but you learnt the business, business sponsorship and all that stuff. You're a little bit ahead of the game and all that,
Yeah, so I left school at 15, went to work in Edwards, went to work in the family bike shop, worked there for a few years, went to America, and while I was out there I worked in S&S, so still worked in the bike shop, and then came back to the UK, back in the bike shop. And when you're working in the bike shop, you learn the industry, you learn how to deal with distributors, and you learn business and margins and spec and everything else. And then I left, I think 85 2005, I left Edwards and took my first kind of job in the bike industry as like a bike rep. And then a year later, got my first job in 96 working for Cannondale. Was like a kind of sales and marketing. So that, like my first marketing job in the bike industry was 96. And then from there, just literally been very lucky enough to see the bike industry from completely every angle. So today, you know, my job today is I'm director of marketing at Cycling Sports Group, and that's GT, Cannondale, but we also handle Schwinn and Mongoose through the UK office as well. And, you know, I'm in meetings every day, and sometimes somebody would say, well, I wonder what a retailer's perspective is on that, or I wonder what an athlete's perspective is on that.
And you know.
And I can say, you know, I'm a really lucky guy.
Yeah.
I've been a sponsored rider. I've been a competitive athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in bike shops for 15, 20 years. I've been an account manager. I've been a rep. I've been a marketing guy. So I'm really lucky to have a real kind of 360
absolutely,
degree view on it all.
Yeah.
But today, you know, my job involves, you know, every element of marketing at regional level for the brands, but also I'm involved at quite a global level with the brands, you know, making big decisions. So the way business works today is that, you know, I'll be on, well, literally today is a day off, right, for me. I've taken a day off to come and ride with my buddies and do a podcast with you, but for 2 hours I was on the phone this morning with head of marketing for Europe, head of sales for Europe, head of digital marketing for Europe, basically talking about like Q3, Q4 sales marketing strategy. You know, and I jumped on the call because I want to make sure I'm only driving, right? I'm either listening to your podcast or on the phone. So I was happy to get on the call even on a day off because I actually still love every day being part of the bike industry.
Yeah, it's your passion.
Look, apart from the Queen who's just popped her clogs at 96, who else loves their job for such a long time?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's anything I've ever done. I've only ever worked in the bike industry, and it's where my everything is. You know, and for me to go to work and, you know, like I meet people and they say, "What do you do for a living?" I'm like, "Well, I talk shit about bikes most of the day."
But you always got the answer. Whenever I say you've always had answers for me when I've ever had questions on stuff, and like, oh, guys will know that, and just very knowledgeable on both sides of.
Well, you know, thanks for saying that, but also it is a bit of a negative because I can sometimes spend like an hour or two a day answering like.
Yeah.
You know, literally my inbox is like, what bike should I get for my kid?
Yeah.
What do you think of this? And
You
what do you
get
think of
into
that?
it,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh, come on, I just need to get some work done.
Yeah. You get sidetracked.
Yeah, but no, like I said, it's mainly just I've been lucky to just be in the industry for such a long time in all these different areas, and that does give you a good perspective. But yeah, I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
And just looking in, I was seeing all the coverage. Obviously, you sponsored the Malvins. GT was the official sponsor. Looking in, it looked really good, professional. Looked like it's a huge success, right?
So I mean, you know, most of the business that we do, I mean, it's tough for me because I have to make decisions. We've got a nice dog barking out the window, so that'll make an interesting one for you. I have to make decisions every day based on like what's the best thing for the business, and that's pretty tough because sometimes you're like, you know what, sponsoring this BMX thing might not be the best thing for the business, but I want to do it because
it's your passion.
I've got a passion for it, so you sometimes have to make difficult decisions and justify them, and that is pretty tough. But yeah, we just did the Malvins. That's because GT is celebrating 50 years this year. So basically we really put a lot of effort into making sure that, you know, GT was really highlighted at the Malvins, and we've just done a video that we're going to put out shortly about. We basically did like a Party to the People tour. So they did one after Sea Otter. The guys at GT in the US did one from Sea Otter. And they basically went all the way down through California.
I saw that they were in San Diego,
with all their pro riders, and they ended up like at Gary Turner's workshop.
I saw that, I watched that.
Eating tacos with Gary Turner. And then they said, okay, next video you've got to do in the UK. And I was like, how can I compete with that? So, but we did. We've done, we did the Malvins at the weekend. On Monday, we went down to Cardiff and we rode the Cardiff Rampwell Park with James Jones, who's on the Olympic team. Literally 8 o'clock in the morning, he's doing like double flares 10 feet out of a bowl. So that was amazing. And then in the afternoon, we were at Sunset Cycles, one of our dealers, doing a big like demo and trail centre ride out. Next day, we were doing some really sort of epic shots down in Poole, where our office is, doing an e-bike ride along the cliffs. And then the day after that, we were up in Peckham filming with Kai and Trey White for like a BMX race segment. So that video is going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks, and it just captures a nice little moment in the UK about all the stuff we do around the brand. But yeah, 50 years of GT, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and obviously you're heavily involved in, Kai's sponsorship career. Obviously, everything goes over there at Peckham with CK and everybody.
Yeah, we sponsored Liam for a couple of Olympic cycles, and he was an unbelievable athlete and ambassador to work with, and it was really good fun working with him. Working with Liam is totally different than
and that's
working
Liam Phillips, obviously.
Liam Phillips. So so working with Liam was awesome. And then Liam, naturally his career came to a different junction, and now he's obviously doing the coaching thing. He's heading up the whole UCI cycling program, right? So he's like a massive deal. But the next kind of rider on the radar was Kai, because he was coming through. So really the relationship, with CK and the track, the Peckham track is 2 minutes from my family's bike shop, Edwards. Obviously, CK used to race with us back in the 80s, so the connection was already there. And with Kai and Trey coming through, for us to sort of jump the sponsorship from Liam being the Olympic athlete onto Kai was really easy and natural. And actually now in sponsorship now and marketing, brands globally, it's all about diversity and inclusivity and all this other stuff. And we don't sponsor Kai because he's mixed race or comes from a different background. We sponsor him because he's an amazing athlete. But we have to be really careful on that one, because sometimes when we're sort of talking to people, we have to make it clear that we're not ticking a diversity box. We're sponsoring these guys because they are the best athletes in the world.
I mean, he's rad, isn't he?
We're not sponsoring them because they're doing anything to make sure we can say that we're diverse and inclusive. That's not what it's all about. They're just amazing athletes. And when we went to the track to film, Jason Lewis was at the track.
Right,
Just won
the new British champ.
He just won the British champs, and I walked straight past Kai and Trey. I said, I'm not talking to you guys, I've come to see the British champ.
Yes, that was amazing to see.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So still involved with those guys today. It's been so cool to work. Like I said, Liam was super particular about his bike. He wanted custom geometry and everything else. Kai just, rides what you give him. And you're like, we're working on a new frame. What do you want us to change? Nothing. I like it as it is. So I think he could just get on any bike and just sort of do.
I think that's why he's so good. He's just like simple and just kind of keeps it up.
100%. But we do make sure that we put the effort in. For the Olympics, we spent, I think I spent about 600 quid on bottom brackets just on his bikes for the Olympics. So
always giving nice paint jobs and stuff though.
Yeah, custom paint jobs, and also, we got a WhatsApp group, me, CK, Big Mike, Kai, the guys from the Rim brand. Is it E6, the Rim brand that Kai has? So basically we've got a little tech WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
Always talking about how can we make the bike better, what can we do?
Yeah.
So I love tinkering with the bikes.
I know you ain't got time, but you'd be a good mechanic as well.
I would be a good mechanic.
Yeah. Team GP mechanic. I don't think they could pay you enough.
I don't think they could. No. Yeah. So super lucky.
Cool.
I think we've got to wrap it up.
Clive, right? there's so much, we'll go a lot deeper than that, but I think we kind of briefed it. We'll definitely do another one when the time's right and we got more time, but I think that was ace. Really enjoyed listening to that. Final words?
Final words, getting back to what we said about the parents, where would we be without the parents? But also, I think we need to acknowledge people like you, Dale. People like you put a lot back into BMX. I've been thinking about it recently, and there's some people I can think of that have taken a lot out of BMX over the years, but never really put a lot back. And just by doing these podcasts and the stuff you do, with the camps and, the grassroots team and stuff like that, you deserve a big pat on the back, because I think what you do is a great job. And I know that every time you finish these podcasts, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that to you. So
Oh, I appreciate that. Thanks.
good job, Dale. Keep it up.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Always love hanging out, chatting, and yeah, I mean, it's like exactly the same as what you said. It's our passion. It's what we like to do all day long. If it's not work, we just want like be involved in BMX, you know. So
let's treat this podcast as a starter,
yeah.
and then when I come to California, we get together with Grot Baz.
Yes,
We'll do the main course.
He's already mad that probably that he's not involved in this one, and you two have so much history, but funny history, and that's why you got to do it together.
Well, remember, I hate him, but I rate him.
Right. We haven't even talked about the announcing, commentating, bike test. There's so much more. But Clive, great talking. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you all next time.